Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to my masterclass today. My name is Richard Bartlett. I work for a company called Export and Lots with many years' experience in international trade. Today we're going to talk about understanding compliance and supply chain, and we've all kind of had some issues over the last few years, particularly with Brexit. So I just want to talk about the myths and the things to look at and the challenges that you've probably had in the last probably 2 or 3 years, or anything you've had recently. We call compliances like a jigsaw. It's like a jigsaw because there's so many people in the jigsaw. Normally, whenever you're exporting or importing, it's normally the bottom part or the export department who is the last people to get involved with actually moving the shipments. It's normally an order comes in, sales get the order, passed down. And normally the export department is the final person who's doing the shipment. And that's where a lot of the confusion starts when we talk about, and we call it the jigsaw. It's putting all the jigsaw together, and it's making sure that each department, because we all have very overzealous salespeople who want to get sales orders around the world, which is great. But again, it's understanding from a sales point, the challenges that comes with that, with the compliance and understanding your compliance, particularly when you're moving shipments. And in my experience, in a lot of cases, a lot of this can be avoided, understanding the SOPs or your standard operations procedures when you're moving goods around the world. If you get that right, there's no reason why you can't expand your business. There's a real myth about bureaucracy at the moment in the UK that there's a lot of challenges there. Yes, there is, but as long as you're doing the right and correct things and you've got the products, there's nothing to stop you exporting. I just wanted to have a look at some key areas which some of you might recognise as you're doing your exporting and we will talk about importing as well, because a lot of you will be doing parts coming in, etc. You'll be doing lots and lots of little parts coming in that go into your product when you're exporting it. So again, I'll talk about imports later. Incoterms. This is the big area where Incoterms that people get wrong, and not understanding the Incoterms and spending a long time trying to explain them 3-letter words, how important they are. From ex-works to FCA to DAP, they're critical to an exporter. Because if you get that wrong, you end up with all sorts of problems down the line. Not just from the UK compliance and auditing, but also when you're exporting it, when you go into a border, where there's challenges there as well, because depending on what Incoterm you've agreed, depends on what challenges you've had. Origin. How many people, hand on heart, actually physically know their origin? We think we know what the origin is, but again, big changes this year with the origin. If you remember the trade deal that was set with Brexit, with the EU, we was allowed to ship last year for UK exporter. When they're shipping into Europe, you was allowed on your preference, on your commercial invoice, to put on there that this is a UK origin. And under the digitalised trade, as we've tried to implement under WTO, this is one of the greatest challenges. This year, from the 1st of January, a border now can check your origin is correct, and you would have to give them a supplier's declaration. Big changes there, and this has caught a lot of UK companies out, particular exporters. So again, some challenges there. Commodity codes, again, understanding your commodity codes. Commodity codes play a crucial role when you're exporting. And it makes a big difference, particularly when you've got the origin or you're using a UK origin. Because if you've got a trade deal in that origin and you're exporting the goods under a commodity, it's very straightforward because you've got a preference agreement. But if you step outside that and your product's not of a UK origin and it's a commodity code under WTO, there could be issues there. You could need export license, you could need dual use, you could have all sorts of issues there. So again, understanding your commodity and your origin are critical as an exporter. Very, very important. Again, wrong information on a commercial document. How many times when your freight forwarder asks you for a document and you send that document to your freight forwarder, but you've no real idea why you're sending it to them, because they need key information from that commercial invoice. They then may ask you some questions and say, can you just tell me this? Can you just give me this? And they're asking for a reason, because ultimately they're trying to do a customs declaration for you. Very important to understand that. A customs declaration now for any export that's leaving the UK has to have an export declaration. And without an export declaration, unfortunately, you can't move that stuff. So all that hard work you've done, all that sales have done, they were then challenging you to get the goods out straight away and get them to the end user, it falls straight away because your commercial invoice is not correct. And sometimes you're not doing that. Sometimes that's done by another department. So again, it's understanding them levels when you're doing a commercial invoice, key information to go on there. Again, poor instructions to your freight forwarder. Does your freight forwarder actually understand what you're trying to achieve? There's a lot of pressure on a freight forwarder. He has to move your goods. If you're using a courier, a courier will move your goods all around the world, but there's critical information they need. And don't forget, with a courier now, you're more or less filling in a separate commercial invoice so the goods can then leave. If you then go in with a freight forwarder, you're having to do a commercial invoice and instructions, it falls. Again, that's another area. Your freight forwarder will do anything they can for you. But if you haven't given them the correct information, it falls and it fails. Lack of knowledge. Unfortunately, and I don't wish that disrespectful to anybody in the room today, and some of you are a lot older than me. I'm showing my age now, but we've learned over the many, many years of understanding exporting. It's not something you can just pull out and understand. We do a lack of there's a big lack of training in the UK when it comes to understanding exporting. And again, make the effort to start getting the knowledge of exporting, because for somebody young in this industry, actually there's some great opportunities. Because in most businesses I go into as an auditor, it's a huge challenge for a lot of businesses, SMEs, large businesses. It's a huge challenge for them because they don't have the knowledge. What normally happens is Murray, who's been there for 35 years, has always done the same job. And you listen to Murray and then Murray retires. Or Jack retires. And then all of a sudden, nobody knows in the department what is supposed to go on because that knowledge has not been passed down. So again, it's understanding that knowledge when you're shipping. Very important. Again, your customs entry, understanding your customs entry is very important. You have to keep records. If you're exporting here in the UK and exporting around the world, you've got to keep copies of that. That is for an audit trail. You've got to be able to prove, don't forget, if you're exporting from the UK and around the world or into Europe, you're zero VATing. Always remember, there's no VAT on them goods. You've got to be able to prove to HMRC that within a 3-month period that them goods have actually reached where they've reached. And if you can't prove that, there's no reason why you can't get re-VATed again. So again, understand that. It's a real critical area and a lot of people fail, and I'm going to go through Incoterms in a minute. Again, I've talked about SOPs, and I apologise, we're talking acronyms when we talk about international trade, but SOPs, standard operations procedures. It's critical as you start your export journey. Most businesses that export around the world have got less chance of having the financial difficulties that can happen when we're having a downturn in business, because you're not just relying on the UK market, you're expanding around the world. So if new markets around the world are struggling, there's always other markets around the world. So it gives you really good incentive, and please never be put off. Exporting is a great opportunity for the UK. Even if your origin's not correct, you can still export. I've worked all around the world, and I can tell you critically here today, people like to buy and deal with British companies. I was early just with 2 US businesses who have come over from Montana who want to break into the UK market because they see the huge potential there, and they want to also import from the UK market. So there are a lot of opportunities there, and you've seen the courses today and the speakers from other days talking about that expansion. Again, have a look at it. There's some great opportunities, really is. If you can export to France, why can't you export that around the world? There's no different. But it's again understanding, and we call it bureaucracy. And when we talk bureaucracy, it sounds really posh. All it is understanding what your requirements are when you're exporting. If you spent a lot of time, or your sales department spent a lot of time trying to export into a new market, they get the market, they get the customer, and then it all fails within the supply chain. Now, we know there's issues. I spent 25 years in logistics, running my own logistics company before I went into international trade. We know the challenges there with the supply chain, but there are ways you can stop that. There are ways you can look at it. There are ways that you can achieve and move on from that. Again, having that knowledge. You have to sit at the front now. There's no questions, don't worry. No, I'm only joking. Again, good compliance. Always remember now with compliance is really, really important, very important, because having good compliance will make a huge difference, particularly if you get an audit check. Now, you're not going to get one probably tomorrow, but eventually you will get an audit check, and a customs audit will expect you to be doing a lot of procedures. So again, it's something to think about as a business. And I thought today what might be good for you all is to do flowcharts, just to get you to understand. I've been training for many years, and unfortunately I don't read slides, so I have to apologise if I'm going on with different things. I've just put some slides here, and if you speak to Mark at the end, he'll happily, if he takes your email, we'll happily send you these slides. So when we look at an export flowchart, it's very important. I'll just come on this side. It's critical to think about. One of the key areas that we make a mistake on when we're exporting is the original purchase order that comes in. We get a purchase order in, it comes into whichever department, but nobody actually checks the purchase order. So nobody actually checks it and makes sure on the purchase order they're actually adhering to them. It could have an Incoterm on there, it could have a lead time on there. Again, think of these key areas. Purchase order, check your key areas, your lead times. If you can't ship to someone in the US and it's going to take 5 weeks sailing and the product's not even ready in the warehouse and they want it on the purchase order in a 5-week period, which it clearly states, or they want discount, you don't do it. You refuse the purchase order, you go back to them, because ultimately you have to confirm that purchase order. And that's one of the biggest fails we see when we're doing audits, is that the purchase order, nobody really checks it because it's normally done in a different department and then it's just passed down. The Incoterm will be on there. Again, understanding your Incoterm. Key things. Your commodity codes, again, checking your commodity codes, your origin. They might be buying goods from you, thinking that your goods are of a UK origin. So they might be expecting a zero duty under a preference agreement. So the UK, just to explain that, the UK will have many trade deals around the world. And under that, we work under preference. So when we talk about preference, what we mean by that is it's a trade deal between the UK and another country or a group of countries. And part of the preference agreement is if you've got a UK origin, it means that shipping to that importer is going to pay no duties. He'll pay VAT, but he won't pay any duties. So it's a great incentive. It keeps you on the level playing field. Okay, you've got to do a customs declaration, but ultimately you can sell to that market without any duties. Yes, they'll pay the VAT. Yes, they'll have some cost there, and yes, they will have to pay the VAT up front. And that's, again, where there's some challenges. But again, it gives you that opportunity. But if it's not a UK origin and it's a non-preference under the WTO now, there may be some cost there under third country duty. So again, just understanding that market, understanding when we're shipping. Again, all this before we start the flowchart. It's very important. Again, engage with your forwarder. Start to engage with your forwarder, making sure with the forwarder, if they're doing the customs entry for you, make sure you've got the commercial document, make sure you've agreed to everything as you accept and confirm the purchase order. You're checking these key areas. Again, create the invoice, confirm the order, term of sale. Again, very important. If your customers ask you for an ex works shipment, it means they're going to come into your factory or your warehouse and pick the goods up, and they'll do the customs entry. You're not the exporter record. Again, a real myth here that people don't understand. Salespeople just want the order because they can, and I understand it. I'm a salesperson. I understand why they want to do it, because they want to ultimately invoice that. They want to invoice straight away. But ex works creates so many problems for you, because ultimately you don't do the export declaration. You're not the exporter. It's done by your importer. And where that causes a lot of problems for you is that when you come to do your audit checks, you're not doing a customs entry. So how can you prove them goods have actually left and gone to the place they've gone to? Again, how do you know the values are put on there? You've no idea. So again, when you do ex works, you can easily swap that and change it to FCA. You'll have the controls. You can do the export declaration. That's your proof of export. Nice and straightforward. They'll send the carry in. They'll collect the goods. That shows that you're the exporter record. Again, we see so many issues with ex works because the goods move out. There's an issue there. And you get involved with something that you've no control of because it's been picked up and goes out. And how many people come into your warehouse and load the goods? They don't come and load the goods, do they? You load the goods, so that's not ex works. So again, it's understanding your Incoterms is critical. If you want to do DAP, delivered at place, that's fine, because ultimately the importer will pay the VAT and he'll pay any duties if there is duty. If they're asking you for DDP, delivered duty paid, again, be very careful, because ultimately you're going to have to pay the duties and the VAT in that country. And if you're not registered in that country, you've got a VAT bill and you can't get out of it. You've got to pay it unless you've got the entity where you can claim the VAT back. Now, Again, I never understand the mentality or the way importers think, because ultimately if you're exporting under DAP and there's no duty on the goods, they've just got VAT to pay. They can claim the VAT back. Why would you want to pay the VAT for them and then have all the hassle? There are other ways you can do that. There's regimes, and regime 40 and 42 you can use to make your export journey a lot easier. And again, if you want to speak to us about that, we can explain how that works for exporters. But again, your currency, how many people don't understand currency? How many people do a purchase order and don't understand it's in US dollars, or it's in euros, or it's in yen, or it's in another, and you've accepted it, and then all of a sudden when you do the shipment and when you get the invoice, you're charging out a lot less. Well, probably not now with the way GBP is, but you can see where I'm coming from. So again, understanding the export flow chart is really important. You've got responsibilities as an exporter, key responsibilities. You've got your export for packing. Obviously, your shipping costs has to be decided. Who's doing the shipping? Again, your Incoterms will determine that. So again, understanding your Incoterms will determine who's responsible for the shipping. If you don't want to do the shipping, sell on FCA terms. And if you're selling on FCA terms, be very clear, FCA factory. Make sure you put your postcode there, because if you don't, people don't understand FCA has two meanings. It has from factory, nearest port. If you don't be very clear with that and you're trading with India, Middle East, other markets, they will expect you to charge the on carriage from your premises to the port. And trust me, it's very expensive. So whenever you're doing FCA, be very clear, it's FCA your factory. That then makes sure that when the forwarder comes in, you give him the goods, you do the export entry. Once he's left the factory, the risk passes. Remember, when you're exporting goods around the world from your factory, goods are not insured. Goods are not insured, and the freight forwarder doesn't insure your goods. They take out a liability insurance. What that means is that if anything happens to your goods as they've left your factory, depending on who's responsible, the freight forwarder will accept responsibility, but he'll pay a very small amount under their terms. Now, depending on what Incoterm you've decided, determines on who takes that risk. So again, very important to understand your Incoterm, because there's a lot of challenges there. Again, your commercial documents, make sure your commercial documents, URI number, commodity code, origin, be very clear. If it's a UK origin, make sure you can back your UK origin up. It's all right saying it, and it's all right putting it on your commercial invoice, but you've got to be able to prove it under a supplier's declaration. So always remember that. It's very, very important to understand. And this is the only reason when we talk about the jigsaw is why things get stuck or why things don't move. It's normally we've made the problem. We've actually created the problem without realising, because of our not understanding and relying on a freight forwarder. How many of you in this room today rely on the freight forwarder? Which is great. I mean, I've got nothing because I was in freight forwarding, but they're there to move your goods. They're not there to advise you. It's your responsibility. It's very important. Again, your origin, as we've said, make sure if you're claiming origin, your proof of export. So if you're doing ex works, how do you prove you're exporting your goods unless you get a copy of the C88 or SAD form? Very important to understand, because it can cause you all sorts of problems in the future, particularly if you get an audit check. If an auditor comes in, he wants to see, you've got to have clear records that you can prove that them goods have shipped to where they've shipped to. If you're using a courier for delivery, keep it open and store it. Don't leave it as a tracking number, because what happens with a tracking number is normally it lasts about 6 months and then they change it. So when you go to them, it goes into archive and they charge you between £20 and £35 to pull it out of archive, whereas you've actually got it. So again, save yourself some money. Again, make sure you haven't got any licenses. Don't forget, when the UK left the EU, our licenses, when we talk about dual use, you might have goods that come under dual use. Again, under dual use is very important, and the meaning of dual use is you might have a product that you're selling to a manufacturer, but under that manufacturer it might be used in other areas. So if somebody actually gets hold of your goods under X works, how do you know where the goods are going to? So again, please do not fall into that trap. I've seen many customers fall into that trap, and it can be severe. Not just penalties, but also, when we start talking military situations. So again, if you're doing a lot of X works, please check how you're doing your X works. It's very important. Insurance, like I said, there's no insurance unless you're doing CIP. If you're doing CIP since 2020, CIP has the maximum risk of insurance. If you're shipping goods CIP around the world, you're insuring them goods for the customer. If he has a claim, he claims directly on your insurance policy. Remember that. Now, up above, CEO or whatever won't be happy if you've got a high excess on there and somebody claims against your insurance policy and you have to pay up front the excess charge. We all know that in most cases we look after our customers and we end up sorting some out. But again, be careful with CIP. If you're importing, great term. If you're exporting, has a lot of flaws within it. So again, just make sure with that. And again, your Incoterm, I can't stress, your Incoterm plays a crucial role. I've just done an import one here because a lot of you are bringing raw material in, and again, you're creating that purchase invoice. So again, as you're creating the purchase invoice, make sure when you're doing it, you're very clear what you want and what you want from the importer. You know, how many times in China at the moment we're importing goods from China and they're taking months and months. And again, depending on your Incoterm, depends on who takes that risk. And again, your lead times, be very clear what you're expecting. We know supply chain creates a lot of problems at the moment. We know that, but you can mitigate a lot of these issues by having better understanding when you're doing your import, when you're doing your orders and doing your purchase order. And again, the flow chart works very similar. You know, key areas to agree, Incoterms, currency, origin. Again, make sure you check when you're importing goods, is there a duty charge on that? Again, you can check it all. When you're doing exports, which I didn't mention earlier, you can use a global help desk. You can look anywhere around the world what the cost would be to your customer if he's having to pay any duties. So again, very important to understand that. Again, order confirmation, they will order confirmation, agree. Goods are prepared then for export, shipped. Again, customs entry, do not do Ex Works if you can help it, because Ex Works puts all the onus on you to collect the goods, to do the customs entry in that country, to take all the responsibility and bring it over. You shouldn't be doing Ex Works. I know people do it and I understand why, but again, it causes you problems. It's up to your exporter to do the customs entry. If you want to do Ex Works, that's fine, but you need to make sure who's doing your customs entry. If it's a courier, it's not so bad because you've got clear records, but if you're shipping from China on a container, you shouldn't be using Ex Works. Let them, they're used to sending it to the port. Use FOB to the port. It's much easier for you. A lot more cost effective for you. And you can choose the port under FOB. So if you've got a good deal with a shipping line, with a port, you can tell the Chinese customer to send the goods to that port under FOB. So again, just things of saving money and making things a lot easier for you. Again, paperwork received, clearing agent, now very clear. We have gone on to CDS. So CDS, Customs Declaration Services, is the new system that HMRC are using now. You must register on your CDS portal. You must under your under your own gateway. So under your government gateway, you must register CDS. Now, make sure, as our experience, I'm a customs trainer, in my experience, when you register on the CDS and under your deferred account, if you've got a deferment account, it'll list all the people you're dealing with, because you ultimately want them to use your deferment account. But check, because a lot of the couriers who have been bought by TNT, FedEx don't use 000 on the end, they use office number 002, 004. Make sure you check, and the easiest way to check is when you look at a customs declaration, look in box 14. That's the customs declaration person who's doing it. He'll have the URI number there for you. Check that. Check the URI number and make sure it's on your deferred account. If you're setting up a cash account, the same principle. Make sure you instruct your importer, freight forwarder, to use your cash account, because that will save you any money that they charge you extra from a freight forwarder. You know, when they're doing the customs entry, they'll charge you a disbursement charge to use their deferment account. You don't need to do that. Use your own system on the new CDS. And CDS is coming to effect from the 1st of October. From next year, CDS will take over on export, so it's going to be a challenge. It's been a challenge for a lot of freight forwarders, if I'm being honest, and brokers, because it's a whole change it's gone from a system that we've been used to for many years, Chief. I won't tell any jokes today. I know I'll tell jokes when I do Chief. I'll be good today. From Chief to CDS, it's a data element, so it's very advanced, but it's getting used to it. So a lot of your brokers are being challenged at the moment. You won't get a C88 or a SAD form anymore. Okay, it's a different format. So again, make sure you're getting copies from your freight forwarder or your brokers, And there's lots of brokers around here today who are doing different things. So again, make sure you speak to them, make sure you get copies. It's very important. Again, your import responsibilities, be very clear. If you're an importer and you're bringing goods in, make sure you've got clear instructions, because when we talk about valuation, this is what customs are looking at. They want to make sure you're paying your VAT, and they want to make sure you're paying your duty. Now, you can use postponed VAT. So if you've got the opportunity to use PVA, which is postponed VAT, it sounds really posh, doesn't it, but actually it's postponed VAT. Make sure under postponed VAT, you don't get charged the VAT, you just put it on your records. It saves you a lot of money. You don't need to use your deferment account if you're PVAing it, because the VAT just sits in a circle and you just do it on your VAT run at the end of your 3 months. So again, and that's for anywhere around the world. So very important to think of these areas. Again, make sure your instructions and you've got copies of your C88s, your payment, your taxes, make sure. And again, look at your tax. If you're importing from the US and other countries, you may find when you're importing is actually they're using different commodity codes. So check the commodity code. Don't just take their commodity code as face value. Check it. Make sure it describes your product, because you could be paying a higher duty than you should be. And if you are, we can go to not we, but you can go to HMRC and query it and tell them this is the commodity code we want to use. That could save you 4% duty. If you work that out over a year, it's a big saving for you. So again, some clear things to think about. Again, your tariff, very important, it's your responsibility. Even though it's coming over from the US or China, it's your responsibility. It's your responsibility to make sure you're using the correct ones. And I would always do a list of an export and an import list, very important. And again, your proof of preference, if you are using a country where, if you're importing now from Europe, make sure anything over 6,000 euros is REX registered with them. They must be REX registered. And that means that the product they're importing to you or sending to you, exporting to you, they're actually a European origin. Over 6, if they don't, you'll be charged third country duty going forward, particularly with CDS. Very important. If you've got customers you're importing from in Europe, over 6,000 euros, they have to be REX registered, and that's a form of it, like a certificate of origin. It's proof that you can get the preferential zero duty when the goods enter the UK. Very important. If you're not doing that, you must check with your customers or your suppliers. Again, making sure you've got insurance. Here, I've just put a few things on. We do a diagnostics health check. It's a new app where we go into a business and we look at your whole diagnostics. Exports, imports, customs, supply chain. We look at everything. It's through an app, and it gives you a full report from the app. It gives you, your reds, your greens, and your oranges, and hopefully you've got more greens than reds or oranges. But it's there. And again, have a look at that. It's something we introduced about 3 months ago. We've been working on this heavily in the last few years. It really works, and customers. And what it does, it makes you highlight on just the key areas you need to highlight on, because you might be doing a lot of areas what you're doing well. But how do you know unless you get checked? And the only way you can get checked is by getting HMRC in. So you're better off getting somebody before HMRC come in, and make sure you're doing the correct things on there. Again, that's what it is. It goes through, and we've got some very, very key people who do these supply checks or diagnostics. Just on here, on here we're doing some training. We do online training. So we do lots of online training. We work very close with Santander Bank and other organisations where we do a lot of training online, which will look at your business and do training 3 hours on Zoom, or we can do bespoke or anything else. I'm going to leave it open now. Anybody got any questions you'd like to ask? Don't be shy. Yeah. Yep. So 6,000 euros. Yes. So it's on the commodity. So if you've got an invoice, it's 6,000, but it's different commodities. They can do it as a preference under that 6,000 for each one. It's only each item over 6,000. But it's very important, everybody. If you're using REX or you are importing raw material, only for EU and obviously GSP countries, you must be REX, or they must be REX registered. Can I just say thanks everybody for joining us today? Thank you.